Thanks everyone for being here today for our webinar, Unlocking Contemporary Insights for HSPAL Residents. Before we dive in, let's just go over a few housekeeping notes. So first of all, we'll have time at the end for questions, but you can feel free to submit them at any time in the Q&A. And then we'll address them at the end. And then the presentation slides will be sent out in a follow-up email after the session. And great, let's just get started. So today we'll discuss the importance of having a strategic focus and explore key resources to help you identify them. Then we're going to take a deep dive into three critical areas: our pharmacy strategy, infusion services, and workforce. And then we'll wrap up with our key takeaways and a Q&A session. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Jenna. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Rao. I am the CEO of Visante. I've been with the company for about 5 years. I like to say in residency years, I'm a PGY 33, and doing the math on that, you'll figure out that I started my HSPAL residency training at the University of Wisconsin in 1992. Most of my career was spent at UW Health, where I served as the top pharmacy executive and the leader of the HSPAL residency and master's training program for 17 years, from 2002 to 2019. And pertinent to this webinar, at Visante, 21 of our approximately 160 full-time team members have completed HSPAL residency training programs in their past. And I'm happy to say that number will be increasing significantly by the end of 2025. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Hager. I'm a managing director here at Visante. I joined Visante about 3 years ago after a long time in health system leadership, but I started my career as a solid organ transplant pharmacist. So I often like to still call myself that when talking to others. I'm excited to share today some of what we put into the top 10 with Ben towards how that may apply to HSPAL residents. So whether you're a first-year resident or a second-year resident, I'm excited to share kind of how this could help you as you're moving through the early portions of your career. So just excited to help kind of share those experiences today. I think Steve's going to tell you a little bit more about Visante and its background.
Thanks, Dave. As you said, before we dive into the top 10, I want to provide a brief overview about our company and how we support health system pharmacy leaders. Visante is a fast-growing, innovative healthcare solutions company. We offer highly specialized pharmacy advisory and managed services focused on improving operational and financial performance for hospitals and health systems through elevating their pharmacy programs. We provide overall strategy along the entire spectrum of pharmacy needs and crucial implementation and execution skills to put ideas into action that provide great value for our clients. And I've always believed that having a clear and concise vision and mission statement focused on your why provides a true north for your team. And it's really foundational to elevating the success of your team, your department, and your organization. So over the years, I found if you set a clear vision, continuously focus on that vision, and your team really rallies around it and embraces and aspires to that vision, you have a very high chance, a strong likelihood of actually becoming your vision in the near future. So I thought it would be useful to quickly share with you our why at Visante, which reflects our current position in the marketplace, our aspirations, and our culture. And on this slide, you'll see our mission statement that's our purpose, to positively transform healthcare, and to do that through pharmacy. Our vision is where we're headed, what we want to be, which is reimagining pharmacy to improve lives. So our vision is focused on creating new possibilities for pharmacy to improve lives of patients, of healthcare providers, and for the communities that hospitals and health systems serve. And we have core values leading the values of how we behave as a company. And those include mutuality, which means shared success is greater than individual success, excellence, integrity, and empathy. Jenna, if you'd please go to the next slide. A little bit more about a high-level summary of what we do. So Visante is an accelerator of health system pharmacy innovation. As I mentioned, we currently have about 160 team members across 30 different states, and we're adding 1 to 2 team members on a weekly basis. So as a trusted partner for hospitals and health systems across the country, we align our work with the 8 core areas that you see on this slide, where most leading health systems have tremendous untapped potential to maximize value for the organization and their patients if they focus on these areas in the right manner. So we partner with organizations leveraging the deep expertise of our team members to quickly unlock that potential and to help drive their success. So the opportunities on this slide, while represented as standalone icons on the slide, are in reality very, very heavily intertwined in terms of overall pharmacy business unit success. And when performing well in lockstep together with one another, can help to quickly transform a health system's bottom line, improve service and convenience for patients and providers, improve quality of care, patient access to care, and efficiency across not just pharmacy, but the entire organization. Next slide, please, Jenna. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. So kind of with that background about what is Visante and where we're going, where I want to take us today is a little bit more into our top 10 and where I see it fitting in, particularly through the lens of our administrative residents on the call today. So first of all, I think if you are in your second year and it is kind of that season where you're starting to do that interview process to find your first dream job, I think a question that you're likely to face during that interview process is, what is a hot topic in pharmacy or in healthcare, and what are you doing to follow that issue? That was one of my favorite questions I would ask kind of new managers of HSPALs to really understand, like, what is some of the outside learning that you're doing to continue to grow yourself above and beyond what you may be doing in residency? Are you someone who's hungry to go out and get that information and grow your skill set? And think more broadly than the kind of tactical efforts that we may do day to day within a health system, particularly as a manager. I think the other piece that I wanted to include, so I hope that this will help you with that, give you some ideas about what some of those strategic issues may be, and allow you to go a little bit deeper. I think the second piece is if you're moving into your second year and trying to figure out exactly where you want to spend your time, I think these resources are helpful in kind of guiding how you would maybe select where you spend your time. And then if you're a second year resident, you may want to know, when I start with my new team, what should my broader horizon look like? Where else should I go? And so I think for all those reasons, starting with some foundations about why a focus on strategy is important, and then where I see kind of the Visante top 10 fitting into that picture. So let's start with, what is strategy? I've worked with Steve for 20 years at this point, probably more. I don't know. We won't count them. And
It doesn't feel like that long, Dave.
It doesn't. But one of the things that I think has been important throughout our time together is really understanding what is a strategy and what is a tactic. And I will admit, sometimes I can get really focused on the tactics of what do we need to do to get something done. And I think grounding ourselves in what is strategy will help as we're going through the rest of this discussion. And I think at the end of the day, what you should get out of this slide is really two ideas. One is strategy is not just being better at what you already do today, right? So, Steve and I work with a variety of our clients and partners around what should our pharmacy strategy be for the next 3 years? In my opinion, a strategy is not get better at dispensing doses with less FTE is really not a strategy, right? That's operational effectiveness. That's a reasonable goal, but it's not a strategy. Really, strategy is something that is external to the organization. It's a new opportunity we're going to place our bet on. And so a lot of times that involves looking at other industries for new ideas. How could we apply what's going on in tech or the airline industry or what Disney's doing or whatever into our own way that we approach healthcare? And it's all about the value we derive for our patients. It's about the external results that we are able to deliver, not the internal efficiency metrics. And it's also how we as leaders can better anticipate where you need to position your organization moving forward than it is that internal focus of how we get better at doing the things we do today. So when I'm thinking about strategy, this is the lens that I'm thinking of it through. So I think then the next question is, how do I gain that external view when I work inside an organization? One of Steve and I's, I guess one of my mentors, I believe one of Steve's, is DZ. And DZ has been talking with many of us about kind of how he has been thinking through kind of some of the different major content producers around kind of strategic topics. So I think when it comes to strategy, you should use a variety of resources to really get a broad external view. Groups like Deloitte or the advisory board often provide either a global or national view on the shape of the healthcare industry. And I think that can be very helpful to understand what are those macro level forces that we will be trying to define our opportunities within. I think the ASHP pharmacy forecast makes it a little bit more pharmacy specific and really looks at some of those kind of more futuristic looks at what may be coming down the pipeline. And then I think what Visante adds to that mix is what are some of the more practical strategic areas that we should be focused on in the next 3 years that have a high likelihood of producing patient and financial value and are going to need to be a near-term focus of pharmacy leaders. So it's not to say that any of these are better or worse than one another, but I think they need to be applied differently. And together, I think they can be a very powerful set of tools. I think the other component, though, is you don't want to just rely on digital content or things you can read or random webinars you may join on a Wednesday. You may want to reach out to people within your network. And I think one of the things that sometimes as pharmacists we could do a little bit better at is our network is often made up of other pharmacists. And if we're really thinking about strategy and its external focus and its application to groups outside of our profession, really being the genesis of new ideas, having a diverse network to bounce these ideas off of, to see what they're doing in their industries and apply it to our own, I think can really produce some breakthrough results. Steve, I think you got the next slide here around what the top 10 can contribute.
Sure, and I think some of my comments are going to focus on strategy around why at Visante each year we produce the top 10. It's not because we love writing and thinking. It's because strategically we think focusing on the top 10 will really make a difference for our colleagues, for the profession of pharmacy, and for health systems and patients across the country. So a little bit about the past and its purpose of I think helping to bring pharmacy leaders insight into top challenges and priorities facing the profession and what they should be thinking about doing over the next year. I will start out by saying at Visante, we see a very uplifting, positive future for pharmacy, for hospital and health system pharmacy in particular. And our goal for the top 10 is always to help healthcare pharmacy leaders thrive in an ever-changing and challenging industry. So I think I mentioned earlier, we partner with over 160 health systems annually, and we see pharmacy leaders facing a lot of challenges. We also see a lot of innovation and a lot of leaders having success as well. So we see the whole spectrum of challenges and success each year. So based on those learnings, we engage our team members in narrowing down what we believe are the top 10 contemporary topics we can share our thoughts on to help pharmacy leaders and residents focus on advancing important core strategies in their organizations with confidence and success in the coming year. We also see and understand and have experienced throughout our careers that pharmacy leaders face a lot of adversity when advocating for resources that they need to drive change to help the organization be successful to reach its goals. So we try to reach a broad audience with our top 10 messaging to simplify and build clarity and focus around the opportunities that exist in pharmacy to hopefully help senior executives understand the comprehensive positive pharmacy impact they can realize if they look at pharmacy a little bit differently through a different lens and reposition it as a strategic asset to drive high value for the organization rather than a cost center. Jenna, if you'd please go to the next slide. So here are our top 10 for 2025. You'll be happy to hear I'm not going to read them off to you. But I can tell you there's really a ton of great information we packed into the 2025 top 10. Way more than we could get into in the time we have today for this webinar. Thus, I will encourage you to read the entire top 10 carefully. It's all available on our website. Read it carefully and leverage it as a guiding resource for the next few years after the webinar to help improve your future. So in terms of top challenges facing pharmacy leaders in 2025, we expect it to be more of the same. Top challenges are going to be financial pressures, workforce challenges, health disparities, and improving or meeting patient expectations, and those evolving patient expectations for service and convenience. And since we only have 45 minutes or so, Dave and I have decided to delve deeper into 3 of the key top 10 topics that we believe are critical for HSPALs to pay most attention to as they transition into their new leader roles over the next year or the year ahead. So these include elevating pharmacy strategy and roles, infusion services success, and the future of the pharmacy workforce. And throughout the webinar, Dave will lead our discussion on these 3 areas, and we'll have brief dialogue on each at the end of each topic. And then at the end, we'll have time for audience Q&A. So Jenna, if you could please transition to the next slide. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dave to get into the first of the 3 top 10 topics.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. A lot on strategy up front here. What I really want to focus on in this section is kind of 2 ideas. One is that systemness is not new, and it's going to accelerate in 2025. And that's something that we are seeing across a variety of our clients across the country. And then I think the second piece is what Steve just mentioned, which is as that systemness expands, kind of our roles and responsibilities have grown, and we need to help reposition pharmacy as that strategic partner and not a cost center. And we need to continue to push forward on that. We certainly see many places where that is already ingrained. We also see some places where we still have a ways to go in pharmacy, kind of breaking out of the basement within health systems and being that strategic partner. Let's look at kind of the importance of strategy in 2025. I think when we think at the broadest level here, I think we need to make sure we have a clear strategy and that it's going to be nimble enough to face some of the challenges we're likely to face in the near term. And I think that goes for any type of strategic planning. I think, again, we see a range of things as we work with clients across the country. It's very common in some of the work that I do to start a project by requesting, hey, what's your pharmacy strategic plan? I think we see a range of responses to like, oh yeah, here it is. We published this in an annual report of our progress, to I think we have one, I'll have to go find it, or yeah, it's a little out of date. I'll see if I could get it like cleaned up for you. I think part of our, if we're going to win in 2025 and beyond as a profession, if we don't want to be treated like a cost center, we're going to have to set that strategy and make it clear to executives where we want them to go because of these kind of competing pressures that are outlined here. Where I want to go next, if we can go to the next slide, is kind of why I think strategy and systemness is going to continue to be a focus. And this is a bit of a history lesson, and I won't go too deep. But functionally, we have been working towards health system integration really since the 80s and 90s. I think we're just in a different era today than we were before because the way and drivers of systemness have continued to change. In the 80s and 90s, it was about the prospective payment system and managed care that really drove independent hospitals into systems. And this is really before the big EMR kind of era like kicked off. And so it was more about like, let's just like add these because with prospective payment, we need to make sure we have scale. The second era, which really reached its peak in 2010, was driven largely by the ACA. And so now we had incentives to have a system EMR. We had this idea around the quadruple aim. And so now we needed to do a little bit more to drive efficiencies, scale, reduce overhead. Better care at lower cost was a common mantra during this time. And so what we saw during this era was a lot of like local geographic expansion. So like things around us, we're going to see if it makes sense for us to partner. And then really after COVID, we've seen kind of a third phase of kind of because of financial headwinds that have continued to kind of like rock organizations. Really people are looking for more cross-regional partnerships. So think of like a Advocate Aurora joining Atrium, Presbyterian joining Unity Point Health. Like these like massive cross-regional partnerships were really designed to get at kind of new opportunities that didn't exist before. So I think the bottom line here is that systemness is not new. It is not relented in 40 years. And I think what we're going to begin to see is that kind of loose confederation era of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s is going to move towards real system integration to drive value in the future. And that really drives then what should that like larger system strategy be? And we kind of came up with this acronym about really kind of all the big buckets of activity that pharmacy departments now engage in. Now, I've been doing some work with some new chief pharmacy officers across the country, and it is fun to look back on like first 90-day articles about what does it mean to be a new director of pharmacy for a health system and what should you focus on. Some of those articles were written in the early 2000s. And when you look at what those journal articles tell directors they should focus on, it's basically the S and the M, maybe some R, and that's about it, right? None of it was focused on the rest of the scope that we outline here. And so, I think our journey as a profession is that now that we have chief pharmacy officers in these system roles, it's not just about being regulatory compliant, dispensing drugs in a safe fashion. It is all these other aspects of how do we make sure every patient in our system has access? How are we leveraging technology to deliver value? How are we becoming more efficient? How are we being a conduit for our patients to get access to health system or to our health system generally? How are we being entrepreneurial and driving new revenue streams within our health systems? And so I think systemness, the role of the CPO, all of this is pushing us to having a very consistent and cogent and nimble strategy in 2025. So I think I have some questions then for you guys to consider. Do you have that type of purposeful and nimble strategy? Do you have a leadership team and a structure that is resourced in order to drive that strategy and be successful? And then how can we make that leadership group sustainable as we move forward? Those would be some key questions I'd be asking as I entered a new organization. And then I think it'd be good for you to review with kind of your administrative leaders or rotation preceptors about where do we see us on this spectrum around pharmacy strategy?
Dave, I think these are great questions for the audience to be thinking about. I think thinking about these things and coming up with them, answers to them, is going to help you do a lot better in your upcoming interviews for jobs as well, and impress the interviewers and increase your likelihood of getting the job you want in the future. But Dave, I have a question for you. So you and I, over the past few years, we've done a fair amount of strategy work with pharmacy departments, and we've had a heck of a fun time doing it as well. It's always enjoyable seeing organizations come into an event and come out really more fired up and ready to charge the hill with all the great things they can do to improve the lives of their patients and their organizations. But what do you see as a successful approach to strategic planning events?
Yeah, I think at a high level, I think you need to make sure prior to the meeting, you're really getting people to think about like what's going on outside of their department and like get to be thoughtful about like dreaming big and not letting current constraints be the limitation on our strategy. I think it's very easy sometimes with the kind of fires in front of us to get focused in the short term. And I think it's important to like help try to frame that event ahead of time to get people thinking broadly. I think during the event, though, that's really good to bring in as many outside speakers as possible. I think you and I have seen that be really effective to help kind of guide the pharmacy team to see what the bigger organization is trying to get after and deliver and where pharmacy can fit into that global strategy. And then I think afterwards, it's really around how do we develop systems to make this strategy like a sustainable and focus area moving forward? How does it not become a document that we put on a SharePoint site that nobody remembers we created? So how are you going to use racy diagrams, other things to drive action? And then how are we going to check in to make sure we're making progress?
Sounds like a great project for pharmacy residents to help lead this for their departments. At least I've always felt that's been the case. So being positive is important,
Yep.
right? Focusing on the what and not the how. Like it's so easy to get bogged down in how do you do things. So you got to be disciplined about, focusing on the what and what's possible versus the why not. And Dave, is this something that you do? Like, so these events take, it's not like a day, it's like a month or two or three from start to finish with maybe meetings and in-person sessions as part of the overall event and focus to drive the strategic plan. So how often do you think an organization, a pharmacy enterprise, a pharmacy team should focus on strategic planning? Is it an annual event or is it like every few years, or what's your advice on that?
I mean, my take would be it's always good to do a yearly check-in. It might be that you're going to set a 3-year strategy. I get nervous when we go beyond that. There's so much changing, and I
Yeah.
think having a yearly refresh of that 3-year plan couldn't be more valuable to get people, I guess, focused on the future.
Dave, I learned that early on. My first few, sometimes you learn things to do them well by doing them wrong, Mike. And I remember doing a 5-year and a 7-year strategic plan. And by year 3, it was like useless. So I agree with you. Like a strategic plan should be no longer than 3 years out. You got to give yourself permission to change it after a year, after 2 years, because there's a lot of things you can't control in your environment to change. And if you don't stay with it to keep it contemporary, you probably won't be successful.
Yeah.
And lastly, I would say be succinct with it, right? We've seen multi-page strategic plans, and you ought to be able to fit it on a page so that people can read it and understand it. And it can't be tactical. It's got to be really strategic, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I'll never forget. You planned an event, well, you and the admin residents at the time planned an event out at Epic. And I thought one of the coolest things we did is like have kind of key thought leaders from various areas give TED Talks that day to kind of start. No notes, no PowerPoint, just like let's think through what's going on in this space and kind of share what your, future looking ideas are. I thought it was a great event and a great time.
Yeah, so get out of the walls of the hospital and do it in an environment that lends itself to creativity and fun. Big
Yeah,
part of the success.
absolutely.
All right, Jenna, why don't we move on to the next topic? And Dave, you can lead us through this one.
I think the second major area that I'd like to focus on today is this area around kind of infusion site of care restrictions and what's happening in that space. I think one of the most common kind of requests we get from our health system partners these days is, I know there's something going on in infusion. I'm trying to get my arms around it. And I think we should spend a couple minutes here because I think it's an exciting area for health system leaders to explore. This first slide just, really drives home that there's a lot of opportunity within the infusion space. Where there's disruption, right, within the market, there's often opportunity. And I think there's probably no better description as to what's going on in the infusion space today than kind of disruption and opportunity. First of all, I think there's a lot of different reasons why kind of like a traditional just hospital outpatient department focused infusion strategy is not going to be sustainable. And I think those are outlined on the top here, which is a lot of those have access or capacity concerns, particularly because of workforce issues. It's the kind of highest cost level of care we can provide for infusion, and so it doesn't always lend itself to a value-based model. Consumers are looking for more options in this space that are highly convenient to them, and there's just payer pressure. I mean, there's just not like any way around it. Like payers are saying, like, I don't know that I need to pay top dollar for infusions that are safe to be given in other settings. And functionally, like that infusion market has always been dominated by outpatient hospital outpatient department infusion. I can't tell you how many health systems we've worked with, and you'll meet the infusion leader, and I bet you 80% of them come from an oncology background. All of their infusion services really were born out of that environment because really that's where outpatient infusion got its hold. But when we think today about that infusion market and its growth, a lot of that is not in the oncology space, right? A lot of that is in high cost specialty medications for other disease states outside of oncology, like, in rheumatology and GI and in neurology, increasingly, all of those areas. Think about all the growth in drug products in those spaces over the last 10 years, and then look at the pipeline of what is coming in the future in those areas. It's gigantic. And so there are many people who talk about kind of infusion as kind of the new specialty area. It's kind of like specialty pharmacy was 10 years ago. And we need to have a strategy that helps us make sure that some of that volume and our ability to care for patients stays within our walls. So let's look at the next slide to talk through kind of what are those key actions. And so again, 77% of payers are implementing cost saving strategies really to like push infusions into those lower cost settings. They can't afford the cost of care anymore to have everything be through that infusion space. We know not only is that a revenue loss opportunity, more importantly, like that fragments patients' care, right? So how patient-centered is it to say, okay, these highly toxic cancer agents you're going to get within the health system, but these safe, high revenue medications you're going to send outside the walls of the health system to a different vendor who can provide it at a lower cost, right? As a health system, it'd be great if we could keep all of that care internal because we want to care for the whole patient and for all of their therapies. And so what that requires is then a more centralized process, right? Like how do we make sure we get every patient to the right place, make sure they're scheduled appropriately, that they're getting the right type of care they need in the right setting. And I think what we see across the country is that because infusion kind of grew up in a silo or sometimes within an oncology background, it doesn't think about all of the patients in all the different areas that get infusions today. And so we need to have that kind of strategic thought moving forward. It also, I think, it is notable, right? Anytime you have market disruption, it just means other competitors are going to come in and fill that gap. And that's what we see. We see a lot of private investment-backed groups entering into spaces to compete with health systems because they know that there's opportunity there when health systems don't have that full suite of options. And we also know that there are probably legal changes taking place at a state level that may drive even more of this in the future. If we get to site neutral payments, that could drive changes on the HOPD side that also would make sense then to have additional options. So I think the story here is there's a lot of opportunity in the infusion side, and having pharmacy positioned as a solution in this space, I think is the exact type of entrepreneurial approach and system-based approach that can get pharmacy leaders ahead in 2025. So let's talk about how we could get after that. I think the first piece is to really understand where your business is going. I think it also then requires you to evaluate kind of like how we need to broaden our suite of options. What would site neutral payment mean to us? Like not only really thinking about what is our impact today, but what could it look like in the future? Do we have a strategy to get into the home, into other pharmacy-based infusion spaces? And then do we need to look, if we don't have those things today, about how we need to partner with people who have expertise in that space? That could be with a variety of groups in order to get after that. So I think infusion should be part of one strategy early on here in 2025 through 2028. There's just too much opportunity and too much disruption for us not to have a strategy in this space.
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So as you're aware, like partnering with health systems to expand their ambulatory infusion business strategy and footprint is probably our fastest growing area today at Visant. And we often see a lot of confusion, even angst across organizations related to the ambulatory infusion opportunity. So what are some of the biggest barriers that like a pharmacy leader wanted to push this forward that they might expect? And some recommended strategies for getting started or overcoming those barriers.
I think there's two major things that can get in the way of progress in this space. I think the first is around data. So we know that a lot of these infusion orders leave health systems not through the electronic medical record. Okay. And so it can be really, a lot of times these go out on like literally faxed forms, other things to go to these outside groups. And so it can be really challenging for health systems to quantify the opportunity that they have in this space. So, my first suggestion would be, either find a way to do that assessment yourself and get creative with the data you do have using your EMR, or, like you have to almost go clinic by clinic to see. A lot of times clinics have like a list somebody keeps of like where they're sending business today, and you're going to have to do that work to find it. You're going to have to find a partner who can help you get the data to help quickly quantify what that opportunity is, and that's certainly a service we here at Visant provide. I think then the second piece that we run into barriers is who owns infusion. So ambulatory care at a variety of, when you've seen one structure for ambulatory care, you've seen one. I feel like everybody has grown leadership in different ways. In some organizations, there's a strong ambulatory leader that drives consistent clinic and infusion practice across the health system. In other places, infusion is a site level kind of strategy where that hospital kind of decides how that is provided. Maybe there's an oncology infusion leader, but not a non-onc infusion leader. So finding the right executive sponsor for the work to pull the various kind of infusion efforts that occur today into one common thread will be another barrier that'll be important. And it probably needs to be positioned at the right level within the organization to get the kind of like executive support you're going to need to move the operations into a more strategic position in the near term.
Those are great examples, Dave. I don't think we have time to get into the politics, but one of the things we've also seen is like you would think like this is the right thing to do for patients. It's the right thing to do for the organization. Like this should be a no-brainer. Everyone across the organization ought to jump on the bandwagon, right? But you will find certain departments that realize, oh, I might have to do more work with helping to get new contracts to pay in the pharmacy home infusion model, or this is going to like peel business away from the legacy hospital-based infusion center and help, change where revenues are being directed departmentally and shift the organizational power based on that, right? So there's all these political dynamics that occur that, expecting that versus thinking everyone's just going to jump in and then, we're always helping systems get through those barriers, but they are significant. But the value, as you mentioned, is this is the new specialty pharmacy, what specialty pharmacy was 10 years ago in terms of opportunity. No doubt about it.
And it's also like it's again, just like specialty, it's the right thing to do for patients. We have to
Yep.
have a single solution for our patients in this space, just like we created on the specialty side. And so I think the game plan is the same. It's just that the data and the politics are way different, and that's the biggest barrier people are encountering.
Great. This is a great topic. Time check, we got 20 minutes left, so I think we should probably move on to workforce, and then we can take a few questions at the end.
You and I ever run over before? I don't think that's ever happened.
Always.
All right, workforce is last. I don't think you can kind of talk about like near-term opportunities without talking about the pharmacy workforce. I think it's probably been the hottest topic over the last, I don't know, year and a half, probably 2 years, really anytime since COVID. So let's talk about the data quickly. I'm not going to go through all of this again. You guys probably live this every day. You know, the bottom line is we have a gap today in the healthcare workforce generally. We have specific gaps within pharmacist roles, and we've had a long-standing set of gaps within technicians. That's not new. I don't know, Steve, when's the first time you heard about technician challenges? 1992 or something. I don't know.
Every day.
Every day. And so we got a lot of things that we're kind of up against. I think they've just been accelerated and heightened over the last few years. One of the healthcare researchers that Steve and I have worked with, particularly in the pharmacy space, Bree Bakken, and we're going to promote kind of like a podcast at the end. You know, she does a lot of the workforce research with a broader team. And, you know, one of the things she taught me was as kind of like a health system person, we often think about just the step right before us. So, right, like my focus, you know, in health system world was like, where are we going to get new HSPAL residents? Where are we at with that market? Where are we with pharmacists and graduate rates? What we don't often think about is like what's happening at a like population level? Like how many people are entering college generally? Like it's a whole pipeline that we got to work through in order for us to be successful. So enough about the challenges. You guys know that every day. Let's talk about where we could go really for solutions. That's the next slide. So I think one of the areas that we probably need to do more on is like, what is the work? What is the what? And I thought that was like a key part of this article this year is like, if this is going to be our near-term reality, like how do we continue to look for ways to kind of like do more with the people we have? And then like, where have we adopted work that isn't really core to our department or things that we picked up because of some crisis 8 years ago were never really resourced to accomplish, and how do we get past that? I think then within the who section, it's like, how are we more creative about growing that pipeline? Where do we do work at an apprenticeship, a residency program level? How do we like partner with community groups to help people see healthcare as the right profession and pharmacy specifically as their right option? And then at the workplace side, what are there things that we could do to make the workplace better or the right environment? Is it hybrid? Is it removing barriers through workflows, that, you know, inefficiencies that exist today? And what is the culture we've created to make sure we're retaining the top talent that we have today? I think it is really those three areas that leaders will need to be thinking through in 2025. So let's look at some key actions. Again, here at Visante, we want to be about the solutions. And I think the first is critical, which is like, how are we like positioning the resources we have today for maximum value? How are we investing in growing the pipeline, whether that's training programs, apprenticeships, residencies for pharmacy technicians? Like, what is it going to take to help people who are new to pharmacy grow quickly, so that we can broaden the pool of folks who can join in? I think you have to have a long-term vision. I think one of the things that Steve and I have been maybe a little bit critical about is a lot of workforce conversations can get really focused on like what could we do today to provide bonuses to get people in the door. And so really just competing with the health system down the street for the limited resources that are available in the marketplace. Like how can we get beyond that and grow the pipeline for everyone? Where can we get back to more to trying to automate the med use process, get work that technology can do to free up more technicians to do patient-focused work so our pharmacists can be freed up for higher level clinical activities. Like, how do we work that kind of value chain up? And then where can we continue to grow in terms of how we retain our folks kind of beyond the like basics of like do one-on-ones, talk to your people, have huddles, those sorts of things. It should be just kind of table stakes for pharmacy leaders today. So I think we got to get more creative in the workforce place, but I think it actually starts with a focus on the work and what are we doing and do we need to be doing it?
I would agree with that, Dave. Beyond our work here at Visante with organizations, you and I have, we're both passionate about pharmacy workforce, right? We have been for a long time. And we've partnered with others on pharmacy workforce strategy due to our passion for long-term solutions. So do you want to take a minute to describe,
Yeah.
what we did last year and how we got there?
So when I think about some of these key solutions, right, that are even outlined on this slide, particularly bullet point number 2, like let's say we want to grow that pipeline and just make it easier for people to get into our health systems to become pharmacists or pharmacy technicians. Where does most of that work take place? It takes place at a state level, right? So it is going to take a lot of state level innovation to support the structures to make your state the best state for growing health system careers or healthcare careers. And you're going to need a variety of stakeholders to get that done. And so what we did is we partnered with the Pharmacy Society of Wisconsin to really pull together a like interprofessional, multi kind of stakeholder group that included like government, nonprofits, HR groups, like a bunch of different stakeholders, like K-12 educators. Like we knew we needed to go bigger and broader in order to provide a durable solution because we wanted to think more than one step ahead. And so I think people should consider, like, is there something more broadly we could do together with the right partners to find win-wins so that we have the healthcare workforce to provide the care we need for patients in the near term and 10 years from now. When you look at those curves of what we're going to need to face in terms of being able to provide the healthcare that this country needs, we've got to get some longer term solutions spun up now. And I think the state level is the right place to start.
Thanks, Dave. It was a great, successful event. And I think because of that, there's really a 5-year strategy now in Wisconsin where all pharmacy stakeholders have a way to work together to help to address these issues.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, why don't we move on?
Yeah, what questions do we have?
Do you want to do the wrap up and then Q&A?
Sure.
This is Kirsten. I just want to interrupt. There's one great question that adds on right to what you guys are talking about right now, which is, let's see, I just lost it there. Tyler asked, could you elaborate on initiatives that have been successful to retain pharmacy personnel amidst the current workforce shortage? Have you found any interdisciplinary collaboration to assist with mitigating the effects of staffing shortages?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Tyler. It's a really good question. I think one of the challenges we've seen for a variety of our clients is, particularly with some of the more specialized pharmacist groups. So I'm thinking here about your oncology specialists, your transplant specialists, people in the room space, like those folks with kind of advanced training. People are looking at industry and pharma jobs as really desirable. And so that has been kind of a source, I think, of concern for folks about kind of losing some of their talent outside of the health system world. And I think your question's a good one about how do we how do we try to keep some of that talent internally? And I think, first of all, I'll just say I don't think competing on the access of like workforce perks is really going to get you there, right? Like, while I think, we should be thoughtful about how we approve, like how we approach remote work, I think that isn't going to be the only way we're going to get there. I think the biggest thing we need to do in that space is to make sure that those types of specialized pharmacists are really practicing at the top of their license. How are we making sure that the work they're doing is highly rewarding, working directly with patients and providers every day and having a meaningful impact? I think if you, have them bogged down in prior authorizations or administrative tasks or policy writing or like committee work that doesn't excite them, that's going to be a big challenge. And so making sure we have the right focus for that group that gets them closest to the things they love, I think is really important.
And Dave, I think that too, the number one, I mean, there's a few reasons why people are not retained, right? Why do people leave? Number one, they don't like their boss, so they're not respected by their boss. That's always a major reason why.
Yep.
But also, like, they don't feel the organization values them. Now, pay is important as well, especially with pharmacy technicians. And let's face it, if a technician makes an error, they can kill a patient, and they can still, in most organizations, make more money as a greeter at Walmart, right? That is a huge issue we have to take on in our profession and deal with
Right.
it. So one of the things that Dave and I worked together on back when we were at Wisconsin, which, it was to improve recruiting the best, retaining the best, was developing a relationship with human resources, not about like do engagement surveys, but it was about let's put some meaningful resources into investing in our workforce through developing, I don't think we call them career ladders, I think we call them professional advancement programs.
Yeah.
But as technicians and pharmacists took on more meaningful roles, not necessarily managers and leaders, but did things to drive success for the organization and advance their roles, we had meaningful compensation for that. We put resources as leaders into helping them do those things. And it was, it was real money HR had to put into it. So we had to get HR to understand every time an employee leaves, you tell us it costs 33% of their salary to replace them. Well, put your money where your mouth is and support our darn ROI on this, right? So we spent a couple of years working with human resources to get them to buy into that. And I can tell you what, I think it was successful in helping our team members see we really cared about them and their futures, and we really valued the work they do. Those articles are published, and if you just Google Hager, you'll find the publications if you want to read what we did. But it takes work to address these issues, and they got to be long-term solutions. But it's about respect, spending time with them as a leader, and really being genuine about caring about people being successful at the end of the day.
I love it. Perfect answer.
Well, anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. And honestly, I think with all the focus on not workforce, but the pandemic and financials, and there are more competing priorities than ever before. Being a good leader in the regard that Dave and I just commented on is the first thing that goes when you get all these other challenges coming at you. So I think we need to see leaders in pharmacy spend more time on this, not less time in the future. The other question that Brittany posted that I promised we'd answer it, so I want to make sure I live up to that promise. I think it's about communication, right? What are the best approaches to effectively disseminate information across the department to get staff buy-in, especially in larger organizations where effective communication is a challenge. So when I read this question, I read, all right, you do this great work, you develop this great strategic plan. So what? If you don't communicate it well, people aren't going to get it and buy into it, and you're not going to be successful. So how do you focus on that communication? Dave, do you maybe want to start, or do you want me to, or how do you want to do this one?
Why don't you go first? I'll chime in.
I can tell you, it can't be an afterthought. Part of developing the strategic plan needs to be developing your communication strategy, and it takes work, right? You can't put it in a newsletter and tell people to read it and expect that it's going to stick. So this strategic plans are only as important as the leaders in the organization place on them. So it cannot be one and done. So things that I have seen, like doing videos, number one, as a leader about the plan is important. Developing scripting so that you can cascade down to the supervisor level at routine team meetings, where the whole dedicated meeting is about the strategic plan. And then within team meetings or department staff meetings or whatever your venues are to get people together at all levels, you have to have structured agendas that weave in the strategic plan, programs to recognize people living up to the values, repeating, here's the domain of the strategic plan we're going to focus on in the work that we're doing in our area that contributes to the strategic plan. And again, if you don't measure it, it doesn't happen. So you got to be thinking about what are the KPIs, what are the metrics you're going to measure, and take the time to measure them and get them back to the staff. So you have to, it's not a one and done communication is my biggest takeaway. It has to be every leader in the organization spending routine time communicating the importance of the plan, what you're doing to achieve it. You got to take the time to bring metrics back, and it's got to be a major focus of whenever you get people together, weaving in the values and the elements of the strategic plan.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. I think the biggest thing there that you pointed out is kind of like tying what you are doing to that work and then thinking about how those connections go from the executive level all the way to your frontline staff. So what does it mean for me that med access is a strategic pillar for our organization? How should that drive my priorities as a med access technician? Or how does that influence my work as an inpatient pharmacist? Like, I think really making sure that that gets translated all the way through is key work that has to come from the top and be an expectation all the way down.
Yeah. And as an HSPL, you're probably getting delegated to a lot. As you transition into a leader role, I can tell you two things. You cannot say thank you enough, and you can't give the credit away enough. You constantly got to be doing those things when appropriate, and finding ways to say thank you and recognize and give the credit away to your team when they do things that contribute to the strategic plan is something that you need to think about on a daily basis. And that takes effort and planning the night before, the day before as well. And I think, lastly, I've always thought that, I said this earlier, strategic plans can't be multi-page documents. I've always thought developing an infographic that you can start out, if you have a slide deck that you run team meetings or staff meetings with, have that infographic present all the time, put it on monitors that rotate through the department. You gotta put people through brainwashing school a little bit on a continuous basis about this is our plan. It's important. Why does it matter? If it's one and done, you won't be successful. So I think that was a great question, and those are our answers to that.
Thanks, guys. I think for the key takeaways, just want to highlight here all the ways I think you got to continue to think externally to develop strategy. And I think Jenna's going to share some other resources Visante might be able to provide.
Yes, so thanks everybody. Thanks Dave and Steve. That was a great conversation. If you scan the QR code, you'll get access to our top 10 article and podcast, both excellent resources to help refine your strategic focus. You'll also find links to Dave's and Visante's LinkedIn pages so you can stay updated on the latest trends. So I think if there are no more questions, we are good to adjourn this meeting. Thanks everyone for coming today.